Do we know how many like Russian instruments there are that are played?
That in our area, there's a similar bass in Stockholm, and there's another similar bass in Oslo. So those two instruments I'm very keen to have a look at.
Hello and welcome to Chain of Sounds and the second episode of the Brescian Bass Trilogy, where we bring Eleanor Morris to Oslo to check out Dan Stiffe's legendary Gasparo da Salo from the 1580s. During our visit in Norway, we also conducted a fascinating interview with Gisle Kverndock, which you will see in a future episode, so stay tuned.
It's beautiful. This is so pretty. So the youngest wood would be in the middle here because the tree is the largest. That's the largest circumference there,
right,
and it's
right.
like so the oldest ones will be like out here if they haven't like put on a little wing or something. So,
Okay.
Yeah, but so like the oldest ones will be here, and the youngest.
But I mean,
Say that.
shit has happened to it. I mean, it's been through some. They know that this bass was in studio with Beatles and with Duke Ellington, and jazz players had it in London during the Second World War, and they travelled around London.
And it survived.
And it survived.
Oh, because I have another bass that I've had that was in the Second World War, a Danish bass from a Danish maker, and it got bombed into
Oh, really?
1,000 pieces, and they put it back together, and it was fine. And then one day it just like
Oh, really?
fell apart, so we put it back together.
Oh, apparently this one
But
was lucky.
You can just imagine so many stories that we've got no idea about.
Actually, I don't know. Here someone's written some letters on it, and it looks like it was like a shopping list. 1 liter of milk. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yes, here's some letters as well.
Yeah.
I saw a bass. There's a bass in the symphony orchestra that it has like a window that's been taken out of the ribs, and you can see their little it's had hinges there, so you can open the door.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like flat. And it's like beautifully. I mean, because like flatbacks are more sensitive.
Yeah.
But it's like it's really nice and flat
Yeah, it is.
and even.
It is.
And I mean, there's been like that's just a line. It's not a crack. There's been a couple of cracks. Yeah, and you see like the little plugs here. They're little pins. I think they're wooden ones. They were on the other bass. There was they had wooden pins here along the bass bar here. It looks like they've got the same little. It could be. There's one. There's one. There's little like some kind of hardwood that just keep the bass bar in place.
I mean, those F-folds, they're rounded.
Yeah. They're a different shape. What I'm really interested to see is if we take like a rubbing around them and then lay the two on top of each other, if they match up exactly. Because the ones on that bass, they did not. They were not made from a template like we do today. So it'd be, because that's like how did they when they planned out the instrument, where did they they decided where the F holes were going to go, the placement, And then did they just cut them by hand because they were like really good at doing F holes? These bases is like they have such a strong story and such a strong way of connecting with people. But like everyone who comes into contact will have their story.
Okay, now we've seen the base, and we spoke about geometrical drawings and stuff, and now Eleanor's going to show some interesting.
Okay, so when you were having the other interview, so I haven't like done a big study of the base yet, but I just took some measurements and I wrote them down and I started playing with them, and then suddenly the whole number proportions popped out in a very clear way, because on most instruments you get a kind of idea. It'll be like maybe 4 to 5 is quite common, but then it kind of like runs away and it's not really clear. But on this base it seems to be very clear that it was designed with whole number proportions. So this is 4 to 5 on the upper bouts to lower bouts, and then width of the base to the length of the base is 3 to 5, and then the center bouts here to the length is 1 to 3, and the distance between the F holes and the bottom bouts is 3 to 10. And that's very exciting, because usually it's like irrational numbers and just a little bit random. So it's going to be very interesting to study this base. And this is how they worked. It's a method of instrument design that has been lost over time because we just make copies now.
That's interesting.
I think you can use geometry as a tool or as a language to analyze any kind of shape. And instrument shapes are very nice, and you can. It's very cool when they're like being so clearly designed with thought. But you can reconstruct like most shapes to a degree using geometry. When I studied the other base in Gothenburg, I started off. This is for the new base that I'm doing, and I'm doing it on Fusion 360 on the computer.
Right.
So, yeah. So this is how I started off, and it's very kind. I just take a crayon and go around with the paper, and you're going to cut the paper so that the bridge there's place for the bridge. So this is like the starting point and then when I've done that, then still have to. It's nice to have the tracing paper, because you can get the different layers, so we can actually line up. If you put this one away, we can line up the back and front and see what the difference is. And then, we can do that with the different instruments as well to compare them, because they're pretty similar in measurements. You can see that the corners don't line up at all. They're very different on the front and the back.
Yeah.
And there's also the overhang is the ribs. There's like they come in really deeply on the Gothenburg instrument, and this is quite uneven all the way around. And your base is much more even.
Okay.
That the overhang. But so these instruments, they were not like later in Cremona. They made instruments on a form. They made they drew the inside a piece of wood, and then they bent the ribs around it. So
right.
And I don't think that these instruments were made that way. I think they were made freehand, and with the corners here. I think they pinched the corners, and on that base, I think that the end block, it's very old, but it looks like it was set in afterwards, not before like they did in Cremona. I don't think there were linings. The linings have been replaced, and it may have been that there were no inner linings. and that it's not certain that it had a bass bar. It could,
Really?
Yeah, it could have just been a thicker area. I don't.
So the bass bar was put in later.
I mean, so much has happened. It's it would have had, of course, it would have had gut strings. We don't know how many strings. The F holes are so wide apart. It could have had a much wider bridge with 5, 6, 7 strings.
Yeah, that they don't know, but at the end, before we got it, it was only 3 on.
Yeah, and that was common.
But-
That was Italian instruments where they generally had 3 strings.
Yeah, but it's like a big bass. It could have taken more strings
Yeah.
to it.
And it's also because that the neck is they've been replaced.
Yeah,
That would have given us much more information
Yeah,
if
right.
it had, one way for art historians, you can find paintings with instruments. So I haven't done so much of that, but I've read articles that people find paintings with pictures of what were then new instruments.
okay.
And for example, we talked about we're talking about how all the circles that I'm talking about, and you can on some of those Viola d'Amore, and some of those you can actually see that they use those. You can actually see it in the shape that they use the circular geometry
In building.
in the outline. They've got these little.
Wow.
Repaired by Michael Hart, I think, 1978. Now I've got the front and the back, and I've taken a lot of different measurements, and I will take them home with me on the paper and look at them more carefully, study them, make the outlines nice and clear. Eventually do a proper drawing. Well, I haven't done the scroll so well, but it's not an original scroll. So, but it's this is interesting to study. So we'll do that. It's quite thin. It's quite yeah.
It is quite
Yeah.
thin.
Yeah, and there's it goes slants under away here from the edge of the F hole. There's like a chamfer that you can feel. Yeah. So yeah.
So what about if we finish up with Dan playing a little bit
That would
for
be
us
wonderful.
before we leave Norway?
Yeah, you got to hear it.
Wonderful instrument. See how long I get to keep it.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the final episode of the Brescian Bass Trilogy, where we travel to Stockholm to wrap things up. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.